Okay, we'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar session today where we'll be going over invoice and receipting. So, and this is more for specialist billing in ZMAD. Just a few housekeeping rule. So once you log in, if you can please just remember to mute your microphone. If you have any questions, you can ask me via chat and then I can answer it at the end. And also if you want me to cover something specifics. If I'm unable to answer it during the session, I leave your contact details with me. I should be able to get back to you. What we're going over today, so we're going to be looking at patient details. So this is more to do with payers and attaching referrals. I've also put down appointment booking just to make sure the referrals and stuff are attached to it. Billing from waiting room, create an invoice, we'll look at receipting and also adjusting and things like that. So we'll get straight into that. I'll just bring up my ZMAD. Okay, so I'll start with patient details first, and because there's just a few things I'd like to highlight. I'm going to bring up okay, so I've got my patients here. Now, first thing first, when you book an appointment, we do recommend just making sure you do an online PV just to make sure the patient's Medicare has been verified. So you can do that down the bottom here, online PV. You can select, then select the doctor. So I've got my doctor set and click OK. It'll then check to make sure the Medicare details are correct. It should pop up with another little box. I think it's due to come. Okay. So if it's correct, it'll come back to say that it's all okay, the Medicare side of things. In terms of the payer, so payers can be the patient, or in some cases it can be just a third party. So if it's the patient as the payer, I want to highlight just adding health funds. So select your payer. If you are to add a health fund, click add. Oh, sorry, go to details and then look for the health fund. So let me just set this one to, I'll just set it to work cover for now. If the health fund is Bupa Australia, for example, you select the health fund here. You've got a membership number that you can get off the patient. And also there's a UPI field here. I think this is more for family, and it'll be on their health fund card. So if I click close, now you'll then see payer as the patient, the health fund details are here. If you need to change this at any time, you can do so by just going back into details and select whether it's a different health fund or adjust the membership. Now, I started with online PV down the bottom. The online PV, check for the patient and then check Medicare. If health fund details entered, it'll also check to validate if the health fund details correct. Down below the health fund is referrals. So a lot of your clinics requires referrals when the patient comes in. And to add a referral, click add. It'll then ask you to select the doctor, which it'll take you to the practice address book that's been set up. So you can choose to select a doctor, or if the doctor doesn't exist, then you can create one. So if I create a referral doctor, if it's the first time patient is bringing in a referral from this doctor, I can put in their title, their details, and also address and in Office it also requires a provider number for that doctor. Oops. I'll just select one that I've got here. So I've got an old doctor. So I've got that doctor there, and then I can choose a specialist. Now I'm going to highlight this part because if I choose Dr. Davis, I'll come back to this because when you book an appointment, if you book the appointment under a different doctor and put the patient into the waiting room, it's always going to put it under Dr. Davis, and I'll show you that shortly. So new referrals, we've got the referral doctor, their practice location and their provider numbers here. The letter date is the letter on the actual referral. The start date is the date that the patient came in to see the doctor. So the letter date, most of the time they bring the referral on the day they come and visit for their appointment. Other times if they fax it to you ahead of their appointments, so you pick up the letter date from there and their appointment date will be their start date. Period. So this can be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. If it's indefinite and ZMID, you need to put in 999. So to make it indefinite. And then you've set specialist and the referral type, whether it's specialist, pathology or imaging. If you have any notes that you want to also put on this referral, you can do so under this section here. And I'm going to click close. And there's my referral. I can always go back and add another referral if I need to. So a patient can have multiple referrals under their patient details. Okay, so I'm going to click close here and I'll go into the appointment screen. So patient calls up, book an appointment. I've got the patient booked in for 11:15. If I double click on this, what you'll see when you book the appointment in, you see the referral details on the right hand side. And I've booked this patient under Dr. Davis, sorry. And if it's in red, it means the referral is out of date. And while you're talking to them, you can ask them to bring in a new referral. And I'm going to click close. Then I can now attend to the patient. Now the doctor up here, it's Dr. Davis. And I'm just going to show you one thing. If I go back into patient details, and when this referral was added, it was added under Dr. Davis. So I just want to show you something because sometimes it becomes a problem in some of the clinics. If I change this to a different doctor, if I change the referral specialist to be under a different doctor, click close, and I'll go back here. I'll go back into appointments. I'm going to attend the patient under Dr. Davis. So go attend and close. I'm going to go into my waiting room. So one thing to make sure that the patient is definitely coming under the doctor you booked them under. Sometimes they might go into a different doctor, and that's because of how it's set in the patient details. So if ever you attend a patient that's somehow sitting under a different doctor, just maybe check the referral. It could be that that referral attached to it, it's under a different patient. As an example, so this patient, when the appointment was booked, the referral wasn't set. So see how it's blank? If I just go back to appointments, appointments up the top here. If I book another patient, if I book Angelina, and I'll put Angelina as a standard consultation, when when I attend this patient, so it's important to make sure we select a referral here, otherwise it's not going to carry over to the waiting room. So if there's any referrals, you can select them here when booking the appointments. So that's what happened with this patient. When it was first booked, the referral wasn't attached. So if I go back into the waiting room and I'll go to Holloway, if I bring this up, now I can add in the referrals now because I've just added it by clicking referral. So referral. Now, what you then see, the doctors now change to George, even though I booked the appointment under Davis, Dr. Davis. And that's because if I go back to patient details, and that's because under the referral, we specify the specialist, it's under George. So sometimes you see that mismatch and it's due to the referral, the way the referral was set up. Once a referral is attached to an attendant or billing, you're no longer able to delete referrals from SEDMED. So that's just one thing to look out for. Now when I'm billing, so patient's gone to their appointment, they've come back to reception, you do their billing. Now the reason why we recommend using the waiting room for your billing, because in the future, for whatever reason, if Medicare reject or you need to make changes to the invoice itself, if Medicare reject the claim because of incorrect referral details, in the waiting room, you can actually, this is where you can change the referral without adjusting the invoice or issuing another invoice. So if you've sent an invoice with a referral and down, 2 weeks later, you need to change that referral, you can find that patient in the waiting room and simply just change the referral under them. So I've got, so billing, close, let me do my billing. So if I bill this person in the waiting room, highlight, there's bill here, there's bill up the top, and there's bill above that as well. They all do the same thing. They all lead to the invoice screen. So new invoice, you've got your payer set. You've got your treating doctor. So you need to check this and make sure it works okay. So that's the correct doctor, and you've got your referrals as well. If you get to this point and you want to change the referral, you can do so. I've got my service date, item number. If I put in let's go with a 306. If I put in a 306, I'll just put in an amount here and say it's $100. I can then go into properties if need be. If this was for example, if it was a surgical item numbers and you need to specify the hospital, you can do so by selecting the hospital site here. Now you've got indication flags down here as well if you need to tick them. If it's applicable, then you can tick them. In the screen as well, you've got LSBN. So for certain sites, you need some of the diagnostic imaging item numbers required LSBN to be entered, and you can do so by entering the LSBN number here. It'll show up on the invoice. Just going to cancel out of here, and to receipt, I can go quick pay. I'll just continue here. Now quick pay, you can then gives you the outstanding amount and you can select the method of payment, whether it was cash or EFTPOS or direct deposit. I'm going to go with EFTPOS on this one, and just making sure that the bank list is correct if you've got a specific bank list set for your doctors. So just make sure that's correct, and I can put a value here. So most of you get the value automatically pop up. For mine, I've set it for me to manually enter, and I'll show you that settings shortly. So I've got 100, I've entered, I've got 100, and I click add, and then I can either Eclipse, MA Online, suppress, it's just to save the invoice, or you can print and also email. So I can suppress this one, and it's now gone for my waiting room. So if I not build, if I go to build, I should be able to see my patient there with a $sign. I'll just show all. So show all, any patients being billed, it should have a $sign next to them. Sometimes you get a, if a patient, for example, in the waiting room, have an alert. If they have an alert, you'll see under status, you get this little icon here. It just means they've got an alert. It comes up on the right-hand side. The first two patients, they don't have an alert. So as you can see, there's nothing under status. Okay, so I'm going to go back into this patient because I also want to show you account inquiry. I'll show you the invoices I've just created. So account inquiry, I've got my payer. Sometimes you have multiple payers. This one, I also have Medicare added as a payer for this patient. It defaults to the head payer for this patient, which is just the patient. And it's got the outstanding invoice. The one I just created was $100, so I just need to look for that one. So under display invoices, top right-hand side, so it defaults to outstanding. Click on the drop down, select all. This will then give me two invoices. So I've got this one with a green tick, which means it's been receipted, because to the right-hand side, you see the value is 100, outstanding is 0, so it's got a green tick on it. Whereas in the second invoice here, no green tick because it hasn't been receipted or paid by the patient. I'm going to expand this. I'll show you. So I just stands for invoice, which is this level here. S just stands for service. So you can have and that's the item numbers. So if you enter 4 items, it'll come up with 4 different service here, service line. And I also have the receipt number. So under I, you've got number 86. So that's the invoice number allocated for this one. And the receipt number is receipt number 50. Now, down the bottom of this page, you'll see adjustment, re-invoice, reassign, payments, and receipt. And I'll just go through a few of them. I'm highlighting receipt, and you can see adjustments grayed out. So if you want to adjust an invoice, we're just looking at an invoice that's already been receipted at this point. So if I'm adjusting an invoice, I need to be on the invoice level to adjust. Just like this one, needs to be in the invoice level. If I'm on the service level, it'll be grayed out. So I'll adjust this invoice. If I go into adjustment, so what I can do under adjustment, I can void, I can increase or decrease. So these options here allows me to, are the options available for you to adjust. When we go into the adjustment screen, what you'll find, if I click on the invoice level, grayed out void, for example. if I click on the service level, as you can see, the options that lit up, those are the ones that you can make adjustment to. And then I'll go receipt. You've got remove void. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. So so don't remove the void. There's steps that you need to take to remove the void of this invoice. I'll come back to voiding an invoice or reversing receipt from an invoice. I want to skip down to this outstanding first. Now, outstanding, if I go to adjustment down the bottom and I highlight service, I can see all these options shows up. And that's simply because the previous invoice already receipted. The invoice we're looking at now hasn't been receipted. You only void, it'll only allow you to void an invoice that hasn't been receipted in ZMID. So for this one, I can void it if I need to, or I can increase the amount. For example, it was supposed to be 110. I can increase it and I can put down a reason here. And also, if we want to discount by $20, you can do so. If I click close, you can see I've made an adjustment, and that's a discount of $20 for this invoice. So I'm going to click close. So that's the differences between voiding a receipted invoice and an outstanding invoice. You can't void, if I go adjustment on that one, void is grayed out because it's been receipted, where the outstanding one, if I go here, void is, you should be able to void it. So what that means, and if it's been receipted, we need to take this receipt out of the invoice. So it's receipt number 50. Now down the bottom, so we've got adjustments, and then we'll also have payments. So payments will give you the list of receipts. So if I go payments, we should be able to see receipt number 50, that was against that invoice over there. So receipt number 50 matches that. And this is where you can reverse. So go reverse. Do you wish to reverse payment number 50? Yes. Then you give it a reason. Click OK and close. So it'll then make that invoice outstanding. And I'm going to click on full details up the top right hand side there, just to expand. You should be able now to see that it's a red cross next to receipt, and adjustment was made, which is a reversing of that payment of $100, which then put this invoice back to outstanding. So that's reversing a payment. Reverse a payment, and also the next one I'll show you is how to void an invoice. So we've kind of looked at the two before. Now I've reversed the receipt. I then go to adjustment and highlight the service and void. So now it's letting me void this this invoice, and I can give it a reason and close. If you have multiple services, you have to void all the services. Once you void the last service attached to that invoice, it'll cross out the I up the top here, as you can see. So if I go close, now I'm left with this one. So it's basically saying service been void. Okay, so
Monday's confirmed. Yeah, cool. Right, I'm just jumping in on this webinar.
Awesome. Okay, now the next one is, so we've talked about payments. So that payments, you reverse, that's where you do the reversal. If you're looking at if you're looking at a older receipt number, just make sure, be aware that there's a date period that's been set. You might want to take the date back, for example, and up the top as well. you have, you can look for unallocated credits, for unallocated receipts, for example, reversed and fully allocated. So you can filter it as you go, depending on what you're after. So that's payments. The next one is receipts. So patients have outstanding invoices. So if you want to just receipt that one once, maybe a week later or so after they've paid, just click receipt down the bottom. And when you receipt from the account inquiry screen, you won't be able to see a bank list. So you have to make sure you select bank list. So we select direct deposit, however much the patient paid. So I'm going to say $70 for this one. And I can put in a pay date. Say it was paid on the 5th. $20.20 now. Click add, and I can allocate that amount to the invoice. So if you don't set a bank list, you get this message pop up. Then I'll go change, make sure you set the bank list and allocate. Now, allocation, it'll still bring you to this window for you to highlight which invoice that you want to allocate the money to. If you're just looking, this is also where you do the partial receipt. If there were multiple invoices here, partial receipt is down the bottom, and it'll come up if you highlight the service. So say the patient paid 70, and I just want to put maybe 50 towards this, put 50 towards this invoice. I can just simply specify that and close. So that's partial. That's doing a partial receipt. And I'm then left with unallocated of $20, which I can leave it there or assign it. I've just fully receipted it, and I'll click close. It'll then pop up if you want to print. I don't want to print it. Now, this is the invoice I have just receipted. I'll just expand it. So you can see that it's discounted $20, and my receipt number is receipt number 51. And if I go down to payments, it'll then tell me that receipt number. And the payment method and the bank list is this one here, where it says GC, that's the bank list. And I'm just gonna cancel out of the screen. So that's receipting, adjusting an invoice. I'm just gonna show you how to do a re-invoice. So I'm just gonna create another invoice, and then I'll take you through that. Okay, so I'm just gonna put in any item number I know, so I do apologize. I'll put in 150 for this one, and I'll go add, and I'm gonna quick pay. Actually, I'm gonna suppress this one to save and close. I'm also gonna add another payer to this DBA. Okay, I'm gonna go to account inquiry. Now this is my outstanding invoice that I just created. I can, if I wish to re-invoice, down the bottom, re-invoice, click yes. It'll take you back. Now, if you're in the latest version of ZMID, you should be able to change the payer now. I know early version of 30s, ZMID version 30. Some of those early versions of 30s, you can't change the payer. But if you're in our latest version, I am on version 30, 131.2. And I can adjust it. So change the payer up the top. You can change the doctor, a referral, and you can also add additional numbers, item numbers to it. And we're just going to cancel to go back. I can also reassign this invoice to another payer down the bottom. So if I go reassign, I can reassign it to any other payer that's been added to the patient. Just one thing to remember, it's only reassign is only good if you're moving from one patient to another. For example, if someone accidentally billed a baby and the payer should have been the mum, it's better to just reassign the invoice from one patient to another patient. If you reassign an invoice from patient as the payer to Medicare or DVA, it just moves the invoice, but it doesn't actually adjust the amount or the fee type. So that's just one thing to be careful about, because if I move this to Medicare, I can click close. I'll go to Medicare, the payer. I'll go to Medicare, the payer, so the invoice been moved, but it won't adjust the fees. So that's just one thing to be careful about when you're reassigning an invoice from one patient to another. The next thing I want to show you also is if you are to, you can also reassign a receipted invoice. You can do that. In terms of re-invoice, I can re-invoice an outstanding invoice. As you can see, if I highlight this outstanding invoice, re-invoice down the bottom, that comes up. But if I want to re-invoice this one, it's already been receipted, you can see re-invoice grayed out. So once an invoice been receipted or it's been transmitted outside of ZMed, for example, it's been sent to Medicare or via Eclipse, re-invoice, it's better to void the invoice than create a new invoice. Re-invoice is only working if it's an outstanding and it hasn't been transmitted anywhere outside of ZMed and it hasn't been receipted. So that's the re-invoicing part of it. So we've talked about re-invoice, reversal and refund we've covered. I also want to show you something. It's to do with defer, when you defer an invoice. If I'm billing 306, I know in some places where you're entering maybe 5 items or so, and it gets really busy and you just want to save that and come back to it later. So you can defer that invoice down the bottom here. So you can come back. It won't change anything here. You can make adjustments to the payer, the doctor, everything. So 306, I can add that. I can add 110. Oops, haven't added that one. Here, I can add that. I'm going to click defer because I want to come back to this invoice later. Defer. And the next time I go bill, it's always going to ask you, would you like to continue, deferred invoice found, would you like to continue to work on the deferred invoice? I can say yes or no. So if I say no, I can create a new invoice. If I say yes, it'll just take me straight back. So you don't lose anything. And while I'm on this screen as well, we have this message text box that you can enter, and it'll show up on the patient's invoice. Now you can type the message as you go, But if your clinic preferred you to just have a message set for every invoice that you create, I'll just show you where to set that. So if I'm gonna defer this one again. Under practice setup, you have branches, and I'm logged into the Melbourne branch, and we have options down the bottom. Now, this is the branch options for the branch that you're working on, and down the bottom we've got invoice message. So you can enter a message here, and also enable. This is something that's showing up on version 31 and above. Version 30, if you're on version 30, and if you don't, I'm not sure what version you're on, if you look down my screen, the bottom of my ZMed, it's got build 32.0.0. So that's our latest version. If you're on a version 30, you might not have this option show on invoice reprint. So I need to tick this. That way, every time I reprint the invoice, the message comes up on it. So if I just put in a little note, click OK and close. I'll just bring up my patient again. I'm going to say no this time. I want to create one. And you can see this is the message that comes up. And it'll come up on every invoice you create. If you don't want to see it on the invoice you're creating, you can just simply delete it. And you can also have multiple messages set in the branches option. So you can drop down and select which message you want to add onto that invoice. Now, I'm going to go back to account inquiry. So I created a deferred invoice before. It'll say deferred invoices exist, show an inquiry. I'm just going to say yes for this one. Now, there's two ways to change this deferred invoice and onto an invoice. Like at the moment, it's just sitting as deferred, D for deferred. So to change this one to an invoice, I can simply go back and I can bill and continue working on it, and I can quick pay or suppress it. So if I go suppress, let me go to all. So what you'll see under this payer, the invoice, so that's the invoice up there here. So under the payer, you can see that deferred now changed to invoice. So that's that. Also want to point out, so I highlighted in the beginning the importance of using the waiting room. And it's because the waiting room allows you to make changes to the referral if it's incorrect, and you don't have to reissue. So how would that work is, if I go into the waiting room now, and I just want to show you. So if I bring up this patient, it's got the $sign that I've built. This is the referral attached to it, okay? I'm going to go in and say this one, I've sent it off to Medicare. Medicare comes back to say incorrect referral. I don't need to re-invoice. I can simply come and add a new referral here. I can add a new referral, new one. I'll just put a note there. I'll click close. Now on my attendance, go back to waiting room. On my attendance, I'm just double clicking on the patient. My attendance, this is a referral that's attached to it. So, and if I go into invoice, if I go to that invoice, I'll go view invoice down the bottom here. you can see the referral details here. If I go back and I go to the waiting room, to change the referral details, you can just simply select referral, change it to the new one, select, and that'll update the invoice for this attendance. Okay, and I'll click close here. I'll close. Now that's all I have for invoice and receipting. Any questions, you can send them through chat. Otherwise, you can send me an email to implementation@zmed.com.au and I should be able to get back to you with an answer, or I can book in a call back. So thank you for coming today. You guys can have a good day. I'll put up the recording on our ZMed YouTube side for you to watch, or your colleagues to watch when they're free. Thank you. Bye.